morning. I'm Kristen from Artistic Artifacts this morning, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, the Sari silk ribbon and yarn that we carry here at the shop. We often get questions when somebody sees a skein like this is, how do I use that? What do I do with it? Well, you can see I find lots of things to do with these skeins. So we'll talk about a couple of the projects that I've worked on. The first one I'll talk about was part of the Leslie Riley's book tour for her ultimate book on ultimate guide to transfer artist paper. So I made 2 dolls as part of our process. I used Sari ribbon here and here. So that's one way. You could also use them to make fabric buttons. So that is my one doll, and then the other doll, I also used the Sari silk ribbon. It actually opened up like this, and what I did was I folded it over the edge of this the silk, and then tacked it down with French knots, my favorite, using a variegated thread. So that's what that is. And then I made a little rosette, just taking the yarn and twisting it into a rosette, kind of the size that I wanted. And then I just tacked it down with some stitches, put a little piece of green Sari ribbon behind it, and then I have a couple little French knots holding it onto the doll's body. So that was the first project. The other thing I've done is I had taken Judy's embellishment class, fabric embellishment class a couple years ago, and had some pieces that I had never really finished. Not unusual for me when I take a class. So actually, you might recognize the same Sari silk ribbon. So this one I actually sewed to the back with a little bit of the fringe hanging over the edge, which I then folded down and hand stitched with some, again, the eleganza. Actually, it turned out that the color went well with this as well, so I used the same eleganza on that. And then this one.
Edited by Tim Bader Audio. Text copyright 2021.
That's me. Keep going.
Okay.
Production copyright 2021. Penguin Random
So
House
this one
LLC.
Sorry.
I used I think a piece of this, and I sewed it on actually as a regular binding. I didn't fold it under, but then I did a decorative stitch on my Bernina just to tack it down. So that's one way of doing it. And then I knit. When I'm not stitching, I'm knitting. So I have lots of knitting projects. I've done bags. This bag was actually done with the Sari silk ribbon. And this one was done with the silk yarn. And people say, well, what pattern do you use? I don't use a pattern. What I do is cast on, and I might try a couple different needle sizes before I decide exactly what size I'm going to use. This one was probably an 11 or a 13. I'd say this was a 9 or a 10. This one that's a work in progress is a 9. And this is using the Sari silk, the variegated scraps. And I cast on until I decide what size I have. And this one actually, oh, I can't use my phone to show you that I measured it to my phone because Judy's using it to film me today. But this is actually going to be a little pouch that my phone will fit in. So it doesn't have enough give, so what I've done is I've taken a piece of fabric. This is from, I believe, one of our new fabric lines. I put a little piece of Pell on. I glued the piece on. I will just slip stitch this inside so that it has some body when it's done. And then I will stitch up the edges with the yarn, and then I've got a vintage button that I'm going to put on it. But again, I don't use a pattern. It really is trial and error as to what size works best with the yarn. And so the last trial and error that I've been playing with is I have a skein of art yarn that I just have not figured out what I wanted to do with it. Well, look at those colors. So I was like, oh, all right. So this one I'm actually doing a little bit different than, I'm using circular needles for straight stitching, and what I'm doing is I'm sliding. So I want to use this. I'm going to start on this end, and then when I get over here, this will slide back over that way. But what I've done is I've alternated rows. So you get a completely different look, but this will probably be another bag. Lots of fun textures. I've done some where I've done a slip stitch, and it's all about how do I show both the yarn and the sari silk ribbon. So it's in my project bag. I pick it up when I want. My little Japanese rice pouch bag, actually made with a piece of canvas from Sally Kelly's fabric, which we have in the store. So when I'm not knitting, I'm doing other things. I actually decided I wanted to try. In the current issue of Quilting Arts, there is an article by Susan Brubaker-Knapp on making sari silk beads. I have sari silk. I guess I'll make some beads. So I've picked some sari silk from my stash, and she tells you how to cut it. I follow the directions completely and finished my first little ornament, little ball. She made hers into a necklace. I think I'm just going to make these for fun and probably fill a bowl, a little glass bowl or something. And I decided that I've used eleganza both 8-weight and 3-weight as she recommended in the book. That's the weight, and I think instead of the 3-weight, I'm actually going to use some glamour for my next couple ones, because that will make some nice, pretty holiday ornaments. And we've got, so that's, I mean, I don't use all of them on a project, so I've always got some leftover sari silk. The next one is Dreamcatcher. So I've made these dream catchers. I've got 2 of them here. And I've picked up, I find one of Judy's hand-dyed vintage doilies, and find coordinating ribbons and sari silk to go with it. So this one I've actually, I stitch it to the inner hoop using some painter's thread in a coordinating color. So it stretches it out. I also used, for this one, I used some of the painter's thread silk eyelash. And the nice thing about that is when you get this in the pack, it's all scrunched up. So it's scrunched up, but it irons out really nicely. And so even this is actually really fun to use on other things. Actually, the hair on my dolls is using that eyelash. And then I also found out in the shop some vintage, a little piece of lace that was the right colors. But when I'm picking my yarn to do this, this is what here's what your ribbon looks like on the skein, and here's what it looks like when it's ironed. So it comes out very soft. This is a little bit coarse. This comes out very soft. And what I do, much like what you see laid out here on the table, is I lay the pieces out. So I'm not pulling it just the whole strand all at once. I'm actually taking it and finding the colors that I want, snipping it, and then ironing it. So this is, these colors all are in this particular skein. So that's a whole lot different than what it looks like when you look at it here. So it's like, I like the colors, but what's it going to look like? So I open the skein up and cut out pieces. So I end up with lots of little balls. Like this one, I've got lots of little ones because I've cut pieces out of it to find the colors that I actually wanted in this. So I wanted the darker to be up at the top. I wanted it to fade into the lighter colors. There was a little bit of pink on a couple of them, so I wanted to make sure I captured that in it. So I was very particular about doing that, which is the same thing I've done in this piece, which it was really cutting it out, laying it out, playing with it, weaving it, repositioning it so that I got the colors that I want, the flow that I want. I liked the fact that this hot pink was down there, a little bit here. It's got some different colorways. So it really requires some playing with it, but to me, that's the fun of it. And this, because it was soft, I decided that for this, all I did was some just straight machine quilting on it with my walking foot. So the piece is fused. We're using Misty Fuse to the background fabric. And because there were so many threads that come off the silk, I also left the thread ends when I was doing my machine quilting. So it's really kind of a raw piece, but just wonderful colors. And then this one, same concept. I took one of these cream color skeins and pulled up the pieces out, and there was lots of stuff going on inside the skein that you don't see. So I wove this piece. I'd actually then used, I actually believe this was silk yarn that I had, but there are some, there's some eleganza in there and a little bit of tentaculum. But the woven piece, again, I put it on Misty Fuse. I did the stitching to it with the Misty Fuse backing, so that was enough of a stabilizer. And then I was able to fuse the piece onto a piece of fabric. This happens to be one of the Sally Kelly fabrics, which I have embellished with hand stitching, but it really made a wonderful background for this piece. And then added a little bit of Dear Stella, again, as a background. But the stitching, I do the stitching individually, so I stitched on this first, I stitched on this separately, and then added this to the piece. I also I kind of knew where this was going to lay, so I didn't have to stitch and do all this hand stitching on this fabric for the whole piece. So these pieces right here, I actually am working on a project, and I thought I'd have it finished, and then I actually decided that no, it wasn't going to be finished because I didn't want to rush playing with the color. So this is some of the color from the piece, but this is the piece that I'm actually working on right now. So Judy and I were in the shop the other day, and I knew I wanted to use this skein of yarn, and it was like, look at this fabric. It is the perfect piece of fabric for this yarn. So it is Harlequin. It's from the Sue Penn. It's the new fabrics we just got in from her Pizzazz line, but it's a wonderful piece of fabric. It's just got so much color and texture in it. So perfect colors. So this is a work in progress. As you saw, I started cutting from this skein. It's the same skein of yarn, but I chose more the fuchsia and the kind of the what's it, citron or whatever, and then a little bit of the other colors. I'm not sure this is my final placement, but how I do it is I lay these down first. And when I go to actually finish the project, I will have a piece of Misty Fuse about the size that I want. I will use it, lay it out on my goddess sheet, which is what I had the other ones under. I will tape down with just a little bit of painter's tape up at the top so it's stabilized, and then I'm just going and I'm weaving. That's all it is. So I take it, I put it down, and then the next piece is the same way. So if I was going to add one of these pieces down at the bottom, it would go in like that. And when I have them pretty much placed how I want them, then I start to scoot them together. And I said, oh, maybe I'm going to need another piece along here when I get to that. I might want to pull a piece one way or the other to pull out a color. This one I actually noticed, it's got just a little bit of gold embroidery in the silk, so I would want to make sure that shows up. And when I get the placement to where I think this is my final version, this one's coming out because it just doesn't go in there. I do think I'll probably put a few more pieces, but I also haven't cut my fabric because I don't know what size my end is. I don't go with a final design in mind. I go with the flow. The piece speaks to me as I go along. So this will get fused once I've kind of finished all my design, and then knowing me, I will probably end up doing some hand stitching, though I could end up doing some machine quilting kind of in the same harlequin design along the pieces to hold them down. But again, that'll speak to me when I get to that point. And the other nice thing is you do end up, because as you can see, there's lots of silk, little threads. So I've got nice silk bits that I'm going to hand over to Judy today, because next week she's doing silk fusion, and she can add all these little bits to her piece as she's doing silk fusion. All right, any questions?
Nope.
All right.
Specific ones about product, which we're answering.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us. This was fun to pull together. I challenged myself. I've worked on a bunch of new things this week, but it was lots of fun. You can find, I think we've put all the products up online. We will save this so the people who can't get up this early in the morning can watch it, and then we'll get it up on YouTube. And don't forget, we do have, Judy did a video on our fragment dolls or spirit dolls a couple days ago, and you still have time to go and comment on those. And we'll do a random selection from the comments that are both on Instagram and Facebook, and there is a prize. I'm not sure if it's a book or an ebook, but you do get a copy of the book. So make sure you go and comment on that and watch how we made 6 different dolls. Okay, thanks.